What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Smarter Path to LED Success in 2026. Thank you guys all for joining us for this launch and learn. We're very excited to get started. Before we do, just going to quickly go over the platform. I think most of you who are joining are frequent flyers, but just very, very quickly, if you can see and hear us, great. That is already half the battle. If you cannot or you want to adjust the stream quality, feel free to go down to the bottom corner, click that gear, and you can adjust any stream settings or sound settings or anything that you might need. If you have any questions for any of my lovely panelists here, feel free to ask those in the Q&A to the right of the window here. That's where I'm going to be checking for those from. And make sure to keep filling out those poll questions as you see them come up. They should refresh every 5 minutes or so. And we are going to be checking how frequent you answer the poll questions to reward you with your CTS RU, which is 1 CTS, CTSD, or CTSI RU. You will receive the certification for that within 10 business days of this event to the email that you use to register with this event with. If you have any questions about that, of course, you can email me, steph@therAVEagency.com, and I will answer any of those. I see you guys already talking in the networking chat. Keep it up. I love to see you doing that. Someone said, go Bills. We were talking about American football earlier. Feel free to drop in the chat who you are pulling for. And Ryan is very, very sad about the Chiefs. So say, if you feel sorry for Ryan, say, I'm sorry, Ryan, about the Chiefs. And continuing on, if you want to connect with any of these panelists, you can scroll down. We have all of their LinkedIn bios down there. So you can click to do that. And then we have resources there as well. Okay. So now that we have done that, we've established that, I would love for all of our panelists today to kind of give us an introduction and tell us a little bit about themselves. Matt, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for having me today. Matthew Sokowski, Senior Director of Marketing Sales for Crimson AV and the LED Experts Group. Been with the company about 3.5 years now, something like that. And just happy to be here and looking forward to our discussion.
Awesome. Me too. Ryan, I'm going to let you go next because I'm sorry.
Go Chiefs. Everybody, I'm Ryan Cahoy. I lead sales in the Americas for AO Display Plus. So I work closely with our partners, integrators on a range of display technologies, direct view LED, LCD, e-ink, micro LED, etc. For me, my gray hair comes from the digital signage industry. This February will be 30 years in the industry for me. So I've done everything from software to hardware to the ecosystem strategy, working with partners on figuring out what's real versus what's hype. And for the last 2 years, I've been the chairman of the Digital Signage Federation. So if any of you out there are new to the space and you're looking to learn a little bit more about digital signage, check out digitalsignagefederation.com. It's a nonprofit. It's a neutral voice for the industry. This probably won't be my last shameless plug for the DSF as we go through this, because we're constantly trying to get the integrator community more involved. We'd love to get you there. So if you're looking after this to continue learning about digital signage, it's a great resource. With that, I'm excited for the conversation and everybody's questions.
Awesome. Same. And Justin.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I'm Justin Lachowski with Render Impact. I work on the business development and marketing side alongside my team. We specialize in designing high-impact visual experiences for LED environments. And what I've learned about working on all of these projects for better part of 10 years in the digital signage industry now is that LED isn't just hardware. It's very much a storytelling tool. And that's what we do here at Render Impact is we like to tell stories using LED hardware as that medium. And just to piggyback off Ryan and shamelessly plug the Digital Signage Federation, Render Impact is also a member of the Digital Signage Federation. It's a great group of folks, and they happen to be in Montreal in September, so it was great to have an event so close to home, and really excited to be part of this discussion today. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. And I think that we have someone who can drop like the DSF's website in the chat for everybody to check out as well. So I'm going to have them go ahead and do that. But while they're doing that, so you guys are all here for a purpose. You all kind of represent very different but similar like proportions, because we're thinking of digital signage and LED as like this full solution rather than these like very, very separate pieces and parts, because there are so many pieces that go into this. They're all important. Matthew, I'm going to start with you. Before we kind of dive in here, I would love if you would give everyone a little bit of a background on more than mounts, what that means, and kind of Crimson's evolution into the LED experts group and what that is all about.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Crimson and LED Expert Group are also an AC member of DSF. So I third what Ryan and Justin said. Great organization. Definitely worth checking it out. So, but yeah, Crimson AV. For those who aren't familiar with us, we've been in the industry for almost over 15 years now. We're known for our mounting solutions. Have almost 300 different product SKUs for any kind of application, commercial, residential, all the different verticals out there. The nice thing about us as well, we own our own factories overseas. So if someone like some people on the call here needed a certain product made, we have the capabilities of designing it and making it quickly and efficiently as well. So that's why it kind of makes us kind of unique in the space. And then about 3.5 years ago, we started what we call our More Than Mounts division. It's our tagline. You'll see it a lot with our marketing and whatnot. And that kind of started with first focusing on kiosks. So we have indoor, outdoor, back-to-back, shells, all those different applications. We have some menu boards and things that as well. And then LED Experts Group, which is what I kind of oversee, where we have our indoor, outdoor, and all-in-one opportunity, all different kind of product lines and solutions for that space.
Very cool. And love everything that you've brought up, and we've played the clips that you provided. So it's very clear now that Crimson is so much more than a mount manufacturer. And obviously, like everything that you've said makes that super clear. So when integrators come to the LED Experts Group, what are they actually getting that they wouldn't get from a traditional hardware vendor?
Yeah, so we like to say you're not just buying hardware, you're kind of getting a full LED ecosystem. So the first thing we like to talk about is before the product even gets started, we want to get involved immediately with the design. So making sure we give you the right pixel pitch and the LED technologies we'll talk about obviously on this call, COB, GOB, MIP, micro LED, all those different technical options out there right now to make sure you have the right one. And then also the other thing we look at is making sure we pair the processor with the control system. So a big mistake, which we'll talk about as well, is making sure those don't align with the aspect ratio and what you actually want to show on the screen and what the end user's real image or what their end game is, what they're looking to have at the end. And then what other thing makes us kind of unique is our logistics. We make sure we take care of all the shipping, but also we have the capability of storing the project once it's ordered in our warehouse, which we're based out of Northbrook, Illinois, just north of Chicago. As we all know, products can be delayed for many reasons, whether it be permits, construction delays, whatever. And some of this hardware is not the easiest thing to store, so we take that off the plate as well. And then the other thing is we help with a lot of different partners, so like content. So first off, companies like Justin's, Render Impact. We partner with people. We know a lot of people in the industry, which kind of goes full circle back to the DSF, having those people that you can reach out to in different verticals to help really makes a big difference. And we would definitely rely on those and why we've been in business so long with those relationships and connections. So, and the last part is it really is the installation and post-installation. So we like to be on site for our first installation, bringing our partners to help guide that through. And we are a distributor and a partner with Novastar, so processors. So we have remote access to them, even in person for some of our more complex installations. And we like to support after the installation as well, because that first 30 days afterwards is the most critical for the end user to understand what they just bought and make sure they're satisfied and know how to use it. Like you buy a Ferrari, but you don't bring it out of the garage, right? You want to make sure you know how to use all those different bells and whistles and that technology that you just purchased.
No, I love that. And kind of continuing on, like talking a little bit about DVLED here. A lot of problems tend to begin before installation even happens on a project. We all know that. What early pitfalls are you typically seeing in projects like this? And how is LED Experts Group kind of helping integrators avoid those problems so that they don't even have to, deal with that when they come up?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're completely right, Steph, about, I would say most, if not all, the issues you have is all avoidable. And it's usually created before the installation starts, right? We call them blind spots in my circle. But yeah, obviously not having the right pre-design size, dimensions, knowing how many inputs are needed, what their aspect ratio is going to be. And then back to what we were talking about earlier about the processor and the control system not working together. Another big blind spot that happens more often than it should is having the correct number of power and data lines, right? If you are getting ready to do installation and you don't have those correctly aligned with your wall, you're basically dead in the water, right? Until you get that corrected. And the other thing is basically when you show up, if those things aren't ready, right, then you're stopped there. So doing what we call a pre-visit is very crucial and important that a lot of people don't do. They just set an installation date. Everyone shows up to do it, whether it be the integrator, whoever they have doing it, and they don't visit beforehand and find out, oh, the power isn't turned around right, it's not wired correctly, things of that nature.
Absolutely. And I'm going to pick on everyone here, but Matt, I'm going to have you go first. So you mentioned that Crimson is this connector because you have such great relationships in the industry working alongside Novastar, AUO, Render Impact, and others. Can you talk a little bit about why a collaborative approach matters as we head into 2026? And Ryan, Justin, I'm going to have you all think about answers to this question too, because I'm going to pick on y'all next.
Yeah, I mean, it's crucial because the projects are becoming much more complicated in a good way. But we like to say it's not just a product, it's a not just a product, it's a process now. And you have to have different people that have an expertise in those different verticals, from the design to the installation to the configuration. If you don't have that, you're going to have a blind spot like we talked about earlier. That's going to cause issues and delays and more money for the end user for sure.
Absolutely. Ryan, you want to take that one next?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned pitfalls. I don't know if it's necessarily a pitfall, but it's really important to find that right partner, like a Crimson, because they're going to help you navigate all the unknown unknowns, right? Like, for example, there's really no universal standard for LED module quality, bin grading, or calibration consistency. You go to a trade show and it's easy for anybody to make a big LED look good for a 3-day trade show, but what does it look like in year 3? And it's really hard for the buyers right now to know the difference between good quality and bad quality LEDs. That's why I come back to the partnership is so important. Like it's a long-term relationship where they can help make recommendations and they can guide you through that stuff.
Fair. And Justin.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo both, what both Ryan and Matt said, the partnerships in this industry are crucial to success. Happy clients really get the most out of working collaboratively with, folks who understand the visual mediums, the technology behind it, but also, people who also get the visual experience without people who, again, understand all facets of these projects. There are many pitfalls that can occur. People who believe that they can pull off, all aspects of the projects, but don't necessarily have the expertise, leave a lot on the table for the client to, or I guess I should say they leave a lot that left to be desired for the customer to try and put all the pieces together at the end of the day. But again, working with folks like AUO and Crimson, where that expertise on the visual medium really helps us in understanding how we have to approach it from the creative side of things.
Absolutely. And Matt, for anyone in the audience who is planning an LED project now, I'm sure a lot of them are, what is one thing that they should bring to you early before it becomes a really, really expensive course correction later on in the project?
Yeah, I would say the full design, like more visibility, and the sooner the visibility, the better. When someone comes to us and says, I want a certain size screen and this aspect ratio, that's great, but what's the vertical going to be like? Do they want multiple inputs, multiple videos? It can be for advertising or content, ambiance, things like that. And I also like to ask, get the end user involved sometimes with discussions, because this started from somewhere. Is it a retrofit for a sports bar? Or did the end user see something when he was traveling at an airport or at a sporting event or concert? What's the kind of motivation? What caught their eye? and got him excited about this technology, right? And then I had an idea when we tried to talk about the details of speccing the project, what that person really is looking for, and we kind of match that into the space, and again take care of and eliminate any kind of issues that might come once we start the project.
Absolutely. So, Justin, I'm going to put you in the hot seat next, but I think you had a sizzle reel that you wanted me to play before I ask you the questions, right?
Yeah, no, it's fine. You can kind of just let it run as I'm
Okay.
talking, so
Okay.
nobody has to look at my face. They'll look at, very cool LED project while I'm talking.
Cool. Okay, I'll get M to pull that up. But okay, so content is still kind of the last thing people think about, even though everyone here agrees it shouldn't be, because that is what the audience actually sees. In your experience, why does it keep getting pushed to the end?
That is an excellent question, and something I've been trying very hard to educate the market on for the last 10 years. And in my opinion, I think content is still an afterthought because of how LED projects typically come to life. Everything starts with the hardware, right? It's this tangible thing. What's the pixel pitch? The brightness, the nits, the cabinet types. How does the signal move through? What's the mounting, equipment and the structure to it? And those pieces feel critical, and believe me, they are. But ultimately, they end up dominating the conversation. So no one ends up stopping to think, oh, what, ask the simplest question.
Yeah.
What are we putting on this thing? And the other factor that is that clients often underestimate what meaningful LED content requires. They see beautiful examples online. They assume that content will magically just appear at the end, right? It's like a subscription to Netflix. I buy a TV and it's right there when I turn it on. But in reality, that's where the real investment and creative strategy begins. So by the time content enters the conversation, budgets are exhausted, timelines are tight, and expectations are sky high. So that's how you end up with a premium display and generic filler content. And then the moment that the LED is turned on, the content really is the showpiece. So that shift in thinking is very much, what the industry is still trying to catch up to.
I have something just to add to that. I think one of the reasons content becomes an afterthought is because they're treated as construction projects, not communication platforms. So the people at the table are IT, facilities, the contractors, and they're all thinking, pixel pitch and dimensions and that type of thing. And they're always kicking the can of content down to, well, that's phase 2. That's a tomorrow problem. So you're bang on, Justin. Like, everyone underestimates the complexity of feeding the display with good content. And it's because they're so wrapped up in thinking, well, this is just a construction project.
Totally. And just to add to that too, Ryan, they push it to phase 2 and then phase 2 never comes. That's another challenge that we get to.
Jeez. Well, really quick, we got an audience, more of a comment from and it says, working with Matt, Will, and the entire Crimson and DV LED group team has been such a breath of fresh air. They truly think of everything and anything that could present itself when working with dealers. So that is from Jess. So shout out, which is nice. But Justin, okay, you've worked on some very serious visual environments. Why is the experience itself more important now than ever?
That's an absolutely great question again. So, we're living in, I think, one of the most visual eras in history. People form an impression of a space in seconds. Before they read a sign, or before they hear anything, before they understand, who occupies the space, LED content drives that first impression. So if you can bring up that example of Hotel 42, I think this is an incredible, project example for a number of reasons. But it's really about the emotional thought that went into the design. Now, this is a lobby for a boutique hotel in Brooklyn. The lobby is super compact, glass heavy, beautifully styled. So here, the lobby experience is really about communicating quality and innovation and movement, and also creating something that blends very well with the architecture of the space. So it's something that actually slowed people down and created this moment of tranquility, if you will, or immersion. As I mentioned, the lobby space itself is quite small, but the way that the LED was so architecturally integrated into the space, it adds so much more depth to it with the content that we produce, that it's like, this feels so much bigger than it actually was. And interestingly, we actually worked with the interior design team for that lobby to integrate elements of the actual physical stones that they used throughout the lobby to kind of blend the digital and the physical. It's a term we use a lot internally. We call it techerating, and it's that intersection between, technology, interior design, and architecture. And if we compare that to, the River South project that we worked on in Austin, it's similar in that the LED displays were architecturally integrated into the space. The idea here, though, or the intention was, they wanted something calm, biophilic, but also architecturally integrated into the space. And originally, the client had thought about putting a living plant wall in there. But in talking to the customer and the integrator on the project, we had actually convinced them that we can do multiple different biomes that can represent what that living plant life would look like, but recreated digitally. And again, this digital, living wall adds so much depth, dimension, and presence to the space, totally elevates the architecture instead of competing with it. And what we love so much about it is we get a lot of comments still from the folks who are operating the building. People actually go up and try and touch the LED wall because they think it's an actual, living plant. So again, it's that idea of thinking about how to blend the digital with the physical so that you bring together this cohesive design that integrates seamlessly with the space.
And I believe Emily played one of the clips, but it still had the audio. So sorry to everyone who kind of heard two audios. But do you have River South with audio? Okay, she's pulling up River South right now. Sorry about that, Justin.
That's
But
all
she
good.
will play that as soon as she can get that up. But if you wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the word content, and does that even capture what LED environments really require, or does that kind of oversimplify the work that actually goes into it?
I'm really glad you asked this one because it's something I've been thinking a lot about recently. The word content gets thrown around, and I think it does diminish the value of what it takes to create content or create these immersive experiences. So, again, I think that word content kind of undersells what we're doing in the LED those LED environments. For traditional screens, content is fine, video, slideshow, marketing assets. But when you start dealing with architecturally integrated LEDs or, different curved forms or immersive lobbies or illusions, content is too generic because LEDs at this scale really requires experience design or spatial storytelling, light and physics simulation, spatial awareness, and technical problem solving, but also, the narrative intention. And, I think it needs to be thought of a little bit more about, when you're building a movie or you're creating a movie, producing a movie, whatever the term you want to use, the amount of thought and effort that gets placed into building all of those scenes, with the visual effects and, CGI and all of that, those are, hundreds of thousands of dollars in budgets that get placed into that. So, we're not just putting visuals on a surface, we're designing something that behaves like a physical object in the room. It requires that depth, motion, perspective, and intentionality far beyond the simple word content. So yes, I do think content is too broad.
Yeah.
What LED really demands is like purpose-built experiences that are crafted specifically for the space and the audience.
I think that's fair. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I would tend to refer to the LED as a canvas, right? Like when you say content, that implies something like, well, I'm just gonna plug it in and it's like wallpaper or a background. When you think of it as a canvas and you're thinking about the motion and the sight lines and the dwell time and the architecture and all that, that's where you're right. It really needs to be designed intentionally. So I think that's where if we stop treating LED like, oh, it's just uploading a file and start treating it as a canvas or a dynamic communication platform, that's where you can figure out how to get an ROI on it versus just it's an expensive piece of art, right?
That's absolutely fair.
Yeah. And I'll say on top of what Ryan just said is, I like to think of what can you do to get people to look away from their phones, right? Because everyone has a canvas, a display content in their hand with their phone, obviously. And when you're walking to a casino or to a sporting event or a concert, whatever, at a retail environment, and you want those people to stop looking at their phones and look up and say, wow, what is that? And get their attention and get them to engage in that content, that screen. I think that's where we kind of talk about the impact of content and the canvas, like Ryan said, what we can do to get the attention away from what they're doing to what you want them to do, right? And kind of look and absorb that. So I think that's an important point too.
Yep. And speaking of, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add one extra point to that. And I think Matt said it the best is, what can you do to get people to look up from their phones, right? To me, when people ask like, what's the ROI for investing all this, money in content? And I said, can you get people to look up from from their phones? Because digital displays are everywhere now. There's some very generic content that plays out in the world and nobody's looking at that anymore. So really a testament to what we do in the LED space is getting people to look up for a second, even just for a moment of pause that gets them to say, oh, wow, that was cool. Take a picture, post it online.
Yep. And speaking of that, I got Emily to play that River South content again, no extra audio this time, just to get everyone to really, really look at that, because that's a really good example of something that really does make someone stop in their tracks and look at that, at how gorgeous that is. So really, really good example of that. So Justin, what typically goes wrong when teams don't plan content early enough? And I know that's kind of like a loaded question because so much, but maybe a couple examples.
Yeah, sure. When content enters too late, the project kind of loses a tremendous amount of potential, right? So some typical issues that, we get into is, the screen ends up being installed before anyone defines the purpose for it, right? They just see their neighboring company being like, oh, they put in an LED, so we have to. The visuals don't necessarily align with the interior design or architecture, or again, the intention of the space. Sometimes forced perspective illusions don't work because the sight lines weren't studied enough, or, brightness and sunlight issues emerge after the install because, nobody properly thought about how to place that screen, or, content can look flat or generic because it really wasn't designed for the space. And even times, clients can have unrealistic expectations because they saw this beautiful reference online and what they got wasn't what they were expecting. So really, late content planning is how you basically end up with a, 6-figure LED wall displaying a screensaver. Just becomes digital wallpaper. It's not a meaningful asset.
That's a really, really good point. And integrators want to talk through content earlier without sounding like they're inflating the project, which I think is very fair. What is your advice for bringing that up productively with the client?
Yeah, it's fairly simple. The easiest way I'd say to frame it is you're protecting the client's investment, right? So you can say something like, to get the best result you're imagining, we need to think about the visuals early. The LED and the content are one system. They need to be designed together. This message is not an upsell. It's really just, protecting your client's investment and going beyond just the initial sell of, I want to, sell you an LED, but it's actually taking, a personal approach that shows I care not just about the hardware that I'm trying to provide you, but ultimately what you're going to do with that. And again, integrators who talk about content early show that they're not just vendors. They're strategic partners who are really looking out for the long-term success of their clients. You're helping them avoid that classic scenario where the project goes live and everybody suddenly realizes there was no content plan. And I think clients really appreciate that honesty and foresight.
I would agree. And when someone is budgeting for LED, what is a realistic way to think about those content costs so that they don't overspend and blow the whole budget on hardware, which is also important, but this whole time you and I have been talking, it's about how content is important too, and you should plan for that.
Yeah. So I would say, budgeting really shouldn't start with cost. It should start with the intent, right?
Mhm.
You can ask questions like, what is the role of your screen? Should this be calm and ambient? Is it supposed to be iconic and draw attention? Does it need to blend in with the architecture? Are you trying to tell a brand story? Will it change seasonally or evergreen? Stay evergreen? Again, the answer to these questions help determine, what is the complexity required? What type of animation style are we using? How much realism goes into it? The duration, the number of scenes, any sort of simulation requirements or revision cycles, the render time, and licensing. So it's really important, I think, that the screen the screen's importance should
Mhm.
match the investment. So if the client's invested 6 figures or more into LED hardware, the content really should be held to that same kind of standard. Great hardware plus generic content equals wasted potential,
Yeah,
but great hardware and intentional content equals unforgettable experiences. And I think that's the goal for everyone in this industry.
that's
I,
really fair. Go
I got
ahead.
something to add. I wish I could remember who made the statement so I could give them credit, but it was in a pitch somewhere, and they said the way you should budget for content is like budgeting for fuel on a road trip. It's not an
Mm.
optional accessory. It's the cost to actually get somewhere. So, the biggest mistake's not overspending. It's allocating zero and then just assuming, well, engagement's going to magically appear. So
Mhm.
it's so critical early on.
That is absolutely fair. And for all of you, do you think that those conversations are already kind of changing in the industry and people are starting to take content a little more seriously and put that at the forefront of projects? Or is this still kind of like a battle we're in the middle of fighting?
My
Uh,
opinion,
uh,
I think it's getting a little bit better.
Mhm.
But I guess my perspective is the integrators in the middle. It's not about showing up with a creative pitch. It's just asking questions.
Mhm.
Instead of do you need content creation, which implies you're trying to sell something, it's more like, hey, what's the KPI that's defining success? Or hey, when your CFO walks by, what do they expect to see to get the return on investment? That sparks the conversation to get people thinking versus, hey, I want to sell you content design services, which then immediately puts them, back against a wall.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think it's still a little bit of an uphill battle. I can say working with a number of integrators, they are getting better at it. There are a number of folks within all of the integration companies that I've encountered that really are champions for that, and they
Mhm.
understand. Also, to Ryan's point, they're not just trying to sell creative services. They're trying to understand what is the purpose behind what you're doing with
Yep.
the display and the space, and by simply addressing that, you're not pushing an agenda, you're not trying to sell services, you're showing the customer that you care about what they're putting on these screens. And I
Mhm.
think that's especially important. I will say I do think that narrative is changing. A lot of them are starting to at least have those initial conversations and figure out when and if to bring in a creative agency like Render Impact. um, but I still think we're a couple of years away from full-fledged everybody embracing that. But I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get
And I
that.
would just add on that is showing examples of content like we did here with Justin and Render to get people, because people don't know what these things still are capable of until they see it
Yeah.
live. Right? We'll talk about putting an LED on a corner, what you can do with that. Curved spheres, and of course people have heard of the sphere and stuff like that in Vegas. But if you haven't been in there or haven't seen it, it's really hard to even show that on a video or on a call until you really experience it. So I think part of that is asking people, what have they experienced? What have they seen in person? And then remember how that really caught your attention, made you go, wow, what can we do to duplicate or kind of do that same process in your space for you? You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, Ryan, your turn in the hot seat. So the things that I have at least seen a lot of people talking about, and this is coming from someone who reads headlines every day, a lot of chatter about chip on board, micro LED, really, really tight, narrow pixel pitches. From your side of the manufacturing world, what developments are hot to you right now? And what is still kind of just like buzzword city?
Yep. Uh, I mean, I think the buzz is definitely around micro LED and the ultra tight pixel pitches. And that stuff's for real. I mean, for most deployments today, the smart choice is going to be COB and fine pitch LED. The manufacturing process is it's proven, it's predictable, the costs are understood. So it's a pretty stable product. Micro LED is interesting. It brings promise, brightness, contrast ratio, it's higher resolution, but it's not quite ready for prime time. It's getting closer. Like companies like AUO have been invested in this process for probably approaching 10 years now, and many, many zeros to get to a stage where it's getting closer for mass production. But again, today, right now, I think integrators that are looking for reliability and value, it's still the COB and the fine pitch, unless the client comes and says, "Hey, I'm trying to create this unique, one of a kind experience. And by the way, I have no budget whatsoever. Sky's the limit." Those Halo type projects. I think that's where you're going to start to see micro LED coming in the next year or two. Is those types of projects. And I guess we didn't really define some of these terms here. The difference
Oh
between
yeah,
micro
sorry, I'm
LED
just
and
like throwing out
DVLED.
things, not telling anybody what they are.
Yeah, so I'll give you my perspective, and Matt, you can kind of weigh in just because you're close to it. But like to me, when I think of DV-LED, I think big visible pixels in big spaces. Scoreboards at stadiums, where if I look real close, I can see those individual pixels. The next generation that's out there is mini LED, and where that's primarily being used right now is behind LCD screens. So think laptops, high-end TVs, medical devices where you want better contrast or dimming levels. And then there's micro LED, and that's where every tiny little dot's a pixel itself. So think shrinking that big stadium jumbotron down to something you can put in front of you in your house, like you would an LCD TV, where you're not seeing the individual pixels; they're microscopic. So I think what the industry wants is micro LED. We're just not quite there yet. Mini LEDs, kind of that stepping stone. What's actually shipping at scale today is direct view LED.
LED.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would agree with what Ryan said. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about what's coming in the future, but I think you're seeing the rise of MIP2, which is like the next version of technology after COB, which is chip on board. And I think you're going to see a lot of that in commercial spaces moving forward. And just overall, people being aware of the technology out there, and a lot of retrofits where it used to be a projection or LCD is now going to be LED in the future for sure.
Yeah, I think someone needs to write a blog on, the death of LCDs.
Oh yeah. Well, if only one of us here had a publication where somebody could write that and put it.
Wink, wink, hint, hint.
Ryan, all right, next question. Durability, power consumption, easier serviceability. These are things that are quite frankly just not optional things anymore. What improvements are you seeing in panels that genuinely change the long-term reliability?
Yeah, I mean, I think power consumption is probably the next battleground that we're seeing out there. But what you're seeing is the numbers that are coming out of companies' labs don't really match the real world and the installs that are out there. I mean, there is engineering progress around power consumption, but when you look at the numbers on a spec sheet, they're based on like maybe dimming the display to a point that nobody's really going to install it in that fashion, or
Okay.
they're looking at all white max loads. It's very wild, wild west right now.
Okay.
And when you look, you mentioned serviceability. I mean, that's obviously important. I think one of the misconceptions is DV-LED is maintenance free. I don't think any technology is maintenance free. Like it may be low maintenance, but you got to have a strategy to maintain that. So I think the bottom line is when you're looking at evaluating an LED or a partner that's out there, you really want to look at their engineering capabilities to make sure they're innovating and they're staying on top of that service and those power requirements to make sure you're getting a good long-term solution.
Why is it that you think that there is kind of some dissonance between what's on the spec sheet and how people are actually using it? Do you think that the stress tests that they're going through just aren't really comparable?
I think it's just wild, wild west. Like there's not a standard, like, for example, nits. Like there's a set standard that you can measure the brightness and you can put it on there and you know how it goes.
Mhm.
When you look at these, when somebody says, oh, my LED only consumes XYZ power, okay, is that at all white? Is that running it at 20%
Mm.
intensity? Is that running at 50%? Is that running video? Like there's so many variables that go into that I think a lot of it's still marketing fluff, right? The marketing
Okay.
people are like, well, we don't want to say that big a number. Why don't we turn the brightness down and then measure it, right? So I think until there's some very defined standards and everybody tests the same exact way, it's hard to kind of get that apples to apples comparison.
Okay, that's fair, and it's unfortunate that standard is kind of a bad word in our industry, but that is an interesting point that you brought up. And we kind of talked about it a little bit, but sustainability and energy efficiency, they are showing up more in RFPs. And when do you think that they will become standard requirements rather than just differentiators?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I don't think sustainability is really a differentiator for long. I think it's becoming a compliance requirement.
Mm.
Um, if I had to guess, the inflection point in the industry is going to be over the next couple of years. You're already starting to see, cities or utilities offering incentives for sustainability or power restrictions for abusers. So, right now, I think buyers are treating energy efficiency as, oh, that's a nice to have, or if I'm bidding it out, that's the tiebreaker that I'm looking at.
Hmm.
But I think as soon as you look at the total cost of ownership, so you take the energy cost into the operating budget, it stops being optional because once the CFO is at the table and they're involved and they're looking at that total picture of the cost and they're doing the math over 7 to 10 years, it's important because it does consume a fair bit of power. So I think those questions are going to become more and more important on RFPs in the coming years.
Absolutely. And before I ask you guys just a couple of future thinking questions, I'm going to shout out to the audience and have you guys submit any questions that you would like me to ask Ryan, Justin, or Matt here. We are going to reserve like 5-ish minutes at the end for all of those questions that you get in. So if you want me to see those, I would recommend putting those in the Q&A to our right now. And while you guys are doing that, I'm going to ask each of you to go around and answer if you had to make one prediction about the biggest DV-LED shift that's coming in 2026, what would you each think it would be? And Matt, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, I think you're going to see LED in the commercial space a lot more. I think that's coming. And I think it's something just every year it's going to be 10, 15% more and more moving forward. And I think the other thing is, like I said, projectors, LCDs are going to be replaced. And again, because if you explain the short-term and long-term cost of not having replaced LCDs every couple of years, and if you do, they're not going to match up compared to LED, I think that's the way it's going to go. And the other thing which I've talked to, I think these guys and other people about is, I think the viewing experience of live sports is changing. There's a company, not to give a plug, but in Dallas and in LA that are basically having these planetariums that are kind of the new thing to go watch a sporting event. I think you're going to see this popping up all over the country starting in 2026. And I think you'll see even more and more in the years to come. So,
Ryan, what about you next?
I think direct view LEDs really matured rather quickly in the last couple of years. And I think we're moving away from engineered, custom built solutions to more standardized platforms where you've got kind of the defined operating profiles. I mean, the parallel, there's always going to be room for custom stuff. Don't get me wrong. But like the parallel I draw is, we watched the ultra narrow bezel LCDs when that stuff matured in the market. And at first, integrators had to go out and find their own mounts and find their own cables and their processing and put it together. And by the end, you'd call up a distributor and they'd go, here's the package for a 3x3. It has everything you need in it. It's, made for, dummies to put up. It's right in a box. I think with DirectView LED, there's been so much resource put into the engineering of this stuff that we're going to just start to be a much more standardized platform that's easier to deploy.
Justin?
I was actually going to say something very similar to Ryan. I do see standardization being that next thing, right? DV LED has come such a long way in a very short period of time. What makes sense next is to see, some standardization on that platform. And similar to Matt, I think, we're going to start seeing LCDs go away even more and really break out into the commercial environments. But I'm also, starting to see a little bit of a shift for the residential markets. Maybe not 2026, maybe not 2027, but I do see a lot of, resi-mercial integrators starting to now put custom built LED screens into home theater rooms and even just as sort of artistic displays. And I would love for, one day, hopefully soon, for me to be able to walk into a Best Buy and pick up a handful of panels and build a TV myself. So that's what I think is on the horizon.
Okay, and I'm interested to see what you guys are going to say about this one. What should integrators and designers start preparing for now so that they aren't playing catch up a year from now? And same thing, I'm going to start with you, Matt.
Yeah, I would say there's probably a couple of things, but the one thing I would say is don't be afraid of LED, right? It's coming. It's not going to go away. So definitely get involved in that respect. Start to learn the processor knowledge, right? So again, we partner with Novastar distributor and a partner of ours, Lark, to learn their main series, which is the MX, H series, and VX series. And the other thing is I see is that skill set is really going to be needed moving forward, 2026 and on. I talk to integrators all the time and partners, and they're always looking for someone in there to add to their team that's really good at loading and knowing the different scaling of these processors when it comes to installations and stuff. So I think that skill set, the sooner you learn it and get ahead of it, I think you'll be positioned better moving forward.
Ryan?
Yeah, I think the thing to prepare for is stop thinking about LED as a construction project, right?
Mm.
Think of, as an integrator, if you start to think about how do you create a playbook where you can standardize that, you can guide your client through the process as a partner versus reinventing or engineering every project. And, that's where, as part of that playbook, if you're talking about content and services, you're going to be ahead of the curve because you're getting them to think about things holistically. So, if you're looking at, okay, what's the next thing in my business and how do I get a competitive advantage? Stop thinking about it as a construction project and try to think about a playbook to guide your clients back to that standardization.
Awesome. And Justin?
Yeah, I think we've all, spoke about this, and it's, DV LED technology is just evolving so quickly, or it has already evolved so quickly. So I would just say, stay on top of your education, join things like these webinars and, read those white papers, get involved in projects, and, also don't hesitate to reach out to folks like us. We're happy to share information. We're happy to, communicate on what those evolutions and changes are. So I think communication is key and education is key for just understanding what's on the horizon, how are things changing and evolving. I think there's a lot of great, industry podcasts and, webinar platforms are just, rAVe does a great job of educating the market. So I think just really stay on top of that information, and you'll have nothing to lose in the future.
And everyone listened to me. We did get some good questions in from the audience, so I'm going to ask some of those now. This first one is from Christina, and this is kind of about like budgeting for content. She had a question about that. What can you say about the cost and budgets for creating immersive content, like what Justin showed in the hotel lobby? I feel like integrators don't really know what to expect to budget toward creating good content.
Excellent question, and we get that a lot. a number of times what happens is we get into these projects and people still don't even know what they want. What is the visual experience like? How many stories, how many pieces of media are we going to get? What's the duration and things like that? What I do like to guide people on a lot is, or at least when we build proposals, we like to provide a good, better, best scenario. There's different levels of production techniques and animation styles and things that go into producing a piece of content. So having a good, better, best scenario for folks gives them the ability to invest in that content in whatever budget threshold that they have available to them. But also another good, rule of thumb is budget a percentage of your overall hardware spend. Now, in an ideal world, I would love for the customer to budget 100% of what they're spending on hardware and software on content, but that I think is still a little bit, or I guess I got to manage my expectations a little bit there. But I would guide the customer in budgeting at least 20 to 30% for content. What I mean by that is 20 to 30% of your overall hardware and software spend towards content. And again, the higher that threshold is, or that percentage of your overall spend, the better the visual experience is going to be.
I think the tricky thing that people have when they're planning the budget is when I go buy a LCD screen or a mount or a media player, there's something physical I get to touch and feel, and I know what the value is. It's always hard with content because they don't have anything to hold on to, and they don't realize how much effort and work goes on behind the scenes to create it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Justin, I'm sure you get this a lot, but like whenever you give somebody a price on content, the reaction's always like, whoa, that's way more than I was expecting, because people don't have context for it versus I can Google what the price of a 86-inch TV is, and I can have that as an anchor to think about. If I Google how much does content cost for an LED display, I have no idea what result it'll give you, but it wouldn't be remotely accurate, right?
You're so right on that one, Ryan. I mean, I think the challenge too is when people think about content, they're like, oh, for my $9.99 a month subscription, I get access to Netflix, and they have all of the content. But, what you really need to think about is in that one, really high-end movie that you watched on Netflix, that 30-second scene when there's two cars jumping over a bridge and driving off of another truck and explosions happening, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars to build that one sequence. And that's what you need to be thinking about when it comes to content. It's everything that goes into how you build that sequence and the visual effects and the CGI. Again, that's the content that we're talking about here. So think about it more as a film production than just a subscription to pieces of media that you can consume.
Great
Didn't
advice.
AI just create that in 30 seconds? I mean, come on. AI
God. So DVLED question came in and this one's from Nick. For high detail content video walls, when do you think DVLED will be able to take the fight to 1080p thin bezel 55-inch tiled monitors on cost and pixel density?
I could throw my opinion in.
I think,
I think
yeah, go ahead, Brian. I think because of your behind the scenes kind of knowledge, what would you say for that one to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think the direct view LED stuff, you are seeing some companies that have brought the same footprint as a 55-inch ultra narrow bezel that can use the same mounts and you can put it up, but the pixel density isn't there, and the cost is still significantly more than an LCD. If you're just looking at it as the initial capital cost, right? If you look at it total cost of ownership over 7 to 10 years, well, that's maybe where it starts to get different, because if I'm putting up a 3x3 LCD video wall and the middle screen fails 5 years from now, the odds of getting that model are slim to none, which means I'm replacing all 9 screens. Whereas on a direct view LED, if one fails, I can replace a module or something like that. I think, from AUO's perspective, it's probably not direct view LED, it's micro LED that will replace that. And, if I'm guessing, we're still 5 years away from that technology being at a price point that's on parity with LCDs and that. It's really going to come down to the efficiency of the manufacturing process, which just isn't there yet. But, just like all technology we've monitored over the last, 10 to 15 years, once technology gets into mass production and starts going, the costs come down pretty quick. So I think it's going to come. It just hasn't hit that tipping point yet.
Matt, did you want to take that too?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what Ryan said, it's coming. Like the technology's there. They're going to keep advancing it. I still think when you look at 100-inch diagonal and in, I think that's still kind of the sweet spot, but that is changing. And even for our company, we have 55, 43-inch one cabinet DV LED up to, a 1.2 and 0.9 options for retrofit. So it's coming for sure. And you're going to have the one HDMI options as well for LED that are coming. That's going to be more for home, home theaters or your living room. So it's coming, but yeah, it's not a matter if and when, I would say, for sure.
And this one is from Mario. Any standards on pixel refresh frequency or PWM dimming frequency? What is the newest technology in this area as better image rendering enhances photographs and video on these walls?
That one's over my head. I don't
Yeah,
know if I got an answer on that.
It's a little bit too technical for me too.
Yeah.
But I can probably just say, better refresh rate, the better. Especially as content becomes, or I'm going to say LED experiences become more involved, right? There's a lot of motion that happens. When you've got a lot of moving things on screen, I would say, probably a better, pixel refresh frequency is best because, there's no jitter. There's no issues that happen with the visual experience. But then again, depending on what that visual experience is, you can probably get away with something a little bit, slower.
Fair. And last question is from Jess. As we look at houses of worship looking to potentially replace projectors and consider video walls in these spaces, what are some points that dealers can drive home to show clients value in longevity in the video wall as a solution? Which that's a really good question.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with that one. So my first thing would be is LED is really your 10-year solution, and it has really minimal upkeep or maintenance, right? And I believe because most of the time house of worship is going to be indoors, the brightness, the lighting will be much better than if you did any kind of projector or any other solution. Basically, again, your message will be brighter. Every seat in the auditorium will be able to see it. You don't have any blind spots. When you're at an angle, you can much better picture, more clarity. The other thing I would say would be it just elevates the whole entire worship experience, right? I look at it when you go to a concert and just the interaction with the technology of things you can do now with LED, especially with live streaming and things of that nature, is just second to none, right? And also you're going to eliminate those projectors hanging from the ceilings and other kind of obstacles that take away from what you want the audience to look at is what's on stage, what's on the screen. So I think the maintenance and the technology is just second to none. And I think those are some not only selling points, but just facts when you're talking to people in that space, in that vertical.
Yeah, I think, the brightness is a big one. Projectors get washed out fairly easily. I think the flexibility in building different sizes, maybe aspect ratios, that with LED is super important. I always come down to like the challenge I've always had with projectors, and it's not my field that I've ever spent much time with, is the bulbs always seem to fail at the worst possible time, right? When it's critical. And I think that's something to consider on this. But the other part is, everybody's trying to create an experience, and that comes right down to Sunday worship as well. And if you're building a new facility and you're renovating and you put a projector in, what does that say? Is that yesterday's technology versus if you're doing something new and state of the art, back to creating the experience and getting more butts in the pews on Sundays kind of thing? I think every little detail matters.
Yeah, great point. So I think we are about out of time here. So my last question for all of you is going to be to give any final thoughts to our lovely audience and tell everyone where they can find more about you or your organizations. Matt?
Yeah, thanks. So again, you can find me on LinkedIn, crimsonav.com and ledexpertsgroup.com is our landing page. Also, you might share stuff like we try to make things simple. So if and when you have a project currently or in the future, we have something called an LED quote request form. Basically, you fill that out, gives us all the specifications we need to kind of start the discussion and get the right quote and software and process and the specs involved. and kind of take from there. Yeah, you can find me all different places, and always love to talk about different products and opportunities, and kind of getting into the design side of it to begin with is always what kind of excites me. So.
Awesome. And for all of you who are interested in either of those resources that Matt mentioned, just scroll down on this page and we have both of the links to those so you guys can have that.
I don't think I'll ask
Ryan?
the last question though. The actual question was,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
yeah, sorry. I totally forgot that part. Was I would say, like I mentioned kind of earlier, get to know DV LED, reach out to people like the people you see on this call here that know it. It's really is the future, the future and tomorrow. And the sooner you kind of embrace it and get to know about it, the more comfortable you'll get with doing this type of projects in the future.
Perfect. Ryan?
Yeah, I think they put my LinkedIn profile in there. I'm always looking for more friends, so feel free to friend me, shoot me questions, whatever type of thing. I'm happy to answer anything about technology. When it comes from a takeaway, I'm going to end with how I started. DigitalSignageFederation.com. Like, it's a good, generic, non-biased resource on the industry. That's, everything. Whether you're looking at e-ink, LCDs, whatever. Like, you're trying to educate yourself on digital signage, what that means to your business, what you can do. I would consider you, or I would suggest, check it out, take some of the ongoing education that's there, attend some of our mix and mingles and events, but join, become a member, get involved, volunteer. I mean, I don't know, Matt, Justin, you guys, I think are the same as me. Like, the reason we go to these mix and mingles and we network with the ecosystem is we meet a lot of great people, and it's all about the partnerships and the relationships to help you put these types of projects together, because you're not going to do it yourself. You need partners to do it. And that's one thing that the DSF is great for.
Yeah, and I think we have, just to follow up with what Ryan said, we have Austin, Texas coming up this year in February, and in Washington, D.C. in May. And I think we'll be out in California at the end of the year as well. So all kind of cool places to check out. And yeah, we always have a lot of fun. We do all kind of cool things. I think Ryan won an axe throwing competition one time, if I remember correctly. And
right back there.
Right back there. There's the trophy right there. So yeah, we definitely do a great job of networking and learning every time we do these things, because there's also some panels with education and kind of a deeper dive on some projects or applications in this markets, but we have a little fun as well. So definitely check them out.
Awesome. Yeah. And Justin?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Justin Lachowski. You can also find Render Impact on LinkedIn under Render Impact or renderimpact.com. I also have a podcast that's AV related called Pixel Chatter, which you can find through LinkedIn. One piece of advice I'll just want to leave, with you all is, just education, get to understand the market. Like Ryan mentioned, Digital Signage Federation is an amazing, resource for networking in the industry and better understanding how all those projects get put together and who does what. But also, don't be afraid to ask questions. Bring in a content person early and often. Those consults are free, so please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. We can, really help guide you folks through that process.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. And again, to our audience, if you want any of those resources that we've mentioned here, scroll down to the bottom of the page and we have links to all of those. And thank you so much to Crimson and LED Experts Group for being here for this Launch and Learn, Matt. We really appreciate you guys. And thank you so much to all of you for being here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And one more thing to our audience, thank you guys all for joining. And again, one CTS, CTSI, or CTSDRU, that will be coming to the email you use to register for this event with in 10 business days. But if you have any questions, feel free to email me and I'll be happy to answer them or find you the answer for them. And again, this is going to be on demand tomorrow right here on Launch. So if you would like to watch this again or reference any of the great points they made, you can do that then. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Happy holidays and see you soon. Bye.
Guys.